The word monster stems from Latin, and it comes from the word monere, which means to show or admonish or teach. It is related with the word demonstrate, which contains monstra, that comes from monstrum. And this means that monsters show something. I would argue that they show us something about ourselves, for what we consider to be monstrous teaches us about our worst fears. So I have already touched upon vampires in my previous video, and now I will expand on our imagination of this particular monster. Like viruses, vampires too are situated somewhere in the twilight zone between the living and the dead. So what makes vampires particularly uncanny is their hybridity. They're somewhere between a human and an animal, since they can shapeshift into a bat if they so please. Like vampires, they too are somewhere in between the living and the dead. They sleep in coffins, for one thing. Also, they are described as being as pale as death, meaning that they do not have warm blood pumping through their veins. Like viruses, they live a kind of burrowed life. They need to feed off the blood of their prey to have energy and to maintain their life. And by doing so, they also reproduce themselves when they bite another human, under the condition that this human being does not die from the bite, that they do not bleed out completely. Another vampire is created. So, like the virus, the vampire uses another organism, that of human beings, to reproduce itself and to maintain its life. And furthermore, they cannot be killed like other living beings, similarly to viruses, who too cannot be killed by antibiotics. Rather, there are special methods required to kill a vampire. Usually, a wooden stake through the heart would suffice, an impalement. Or they're also reputed to be afraid of the cross and of garlic for some reason. Moving on to the other popular undead monster, the zombie. So while the vampire is articulate and sleek and sophisticated, elegant, even sexy, zombie is a half-rotten creature that moves in a very rigid and clumsy way. They are called the walking dead, and this walking aspect of their being is pretty much the only thing that can characterize them as being alive. All other aspects of their personality, any kind of capacity for reflection, what they're doing, seems to be completely wiped out. They only kind of blindly follow some of their strongest desires that they had while they were living. So if you remember the chain of being that I discussed in my previous video, in classical philosophy of biology, Aristotle distinguishes between the plant soul, which is the ability to self-reproduce and self-repair, the animal soul, which is the ability to move, since animal comes from the word animate, and its main capacity, its main characteristic is the ability to move towards the object of desire. And the human soul, which is, according to Aristotle, embodies the capacity of reason. So zombies are an interesting case of how these levels of the soul are incorporated into this monstrous form. So zombies do possess this basic capacity to self-reproduce. However, like viruses, they too depend on host organisms for their life's energy and their ability to reproduce, because they attack other humans. And like vampires, these humans turn into monsters, into undead zombies, after they have been bitten by one. Like they have somehow regained possession of this animal soul, the ability to rise and walk and get what they desire just by moving towards it, although in a very slow fashion, as we have seen in most zombie movies. And they lack this human ability to reflect on what they're doing. You never see a zombie stop and think, hey, what am I doing here? Why was I at the cemetery? Why am I looking so weird? They never do. This part seems to be completely gone. And this is illustrated very well in Jim Jarmusch's movie from 2019, The Dead Don't Die, where you see these zombies kind of going back to their obsessions from their life on Earth. Like one of them goes to a diner and just kills everyone there and just goes for the coffee like it's the end of the world. And he actually goes around saying coffee, coffee. So this obsession that he might have had while he was alive is still somehow lodged in his brain, but he doesn't reflect on why he needs coffee all the time, and he doesn't reflect on, is everything really the means to this end? So does he really need to kill the waitress to get to his coffee faster or not? So this ability to reason is gone. Now, of course, this movie isn't really about zombies. It is about, it's Jim Jarmusch's commentary on our society as well, on this kind of insatiable desire and everything that we are willing to do to satisfy it. So in a way, we are like zombies that just work toward the destruction of our world by ingesting it, by incorporating everything we can into ourselves, just destroying everything around us. Monsters show something. They show our worst fears about infectious diseases, but also on our own capacity to destroy ourselves and our environment. And finally, after having compared viruses to monsters in 2 videos, I would like to come to some final thoughts on why viruses may not be as monstrous after all. So the very fact that they were not considered as alive for a very long time in the 20th century prevented us from thinking about their role in the evolutionary history. And now that we kind of acknowledge their complex status as living a kind of borrowed life and being on the verge of life in some sense, more research is being done in this area. It is recognized that some viruses are billions of years old, and most viruses are in fact not pathogenic at all. It means that they do not cause diseases of any kind. Rather, they live dormant in the organism, not causing any harm or even enhancing the organism in some way. So for instance, if tobacco plants or rice plants are infected by the TMV virus or similar viruses, they are able to survive without water for a longer time. Also, it is increasingly being recognized that viruses are important nodes in the web of life and key players in evolutionary history that are responsible for genetic innovation in species. And what about you? What do you think is the freakiest thing about this public health emergency we're experiencing at the moment? Is it the disease itself? Or is it the fact that during the lockdown the streets were empty, in other words tourist-packed cities, as if we were in some kind of zombie apocalypse movie? Or is it maybe the fear of unwittingly infecting someone we love, who will then go and die from it, or go and infect someone else who will fall seriously ill and then die from it? Does it make us afraid of ourselves and of what we can do to others?